John Flamsteed was born in Denby in August 1646. His father Stephen was a local merchant. The family had briefly left Derby for Denby during an outbreak of plague, but later returned to the house they owned in Queen Street. This house was later owned by John Whitehurst, and it was the last residence of Joseph Wright. It's now commemorated by a blue plaque erected by Derby Civic Society. Flamsteed was educated at Derby Free School near St Peter's Church and seems to have taken an early interest in astronomy. A period of ill health delayed his entrance to university, but did give him time to further develop his interests. During this period, Flamsteed produced a number of observations from Derby which would find their way into his later work. He also submitted a paper to the Royal Society based on his observations from Derby. He argued that Derby was a good place to plot a meridian because of its position near the geographical centre of Britain, and therefore a good place to base calculations. The fact that this meridian ran through Flamsteed's back garden was an added bonus. Flamsteed also acquired instruments which would assist him in his observations: a telescope, astronomical quadrant and a micrometer. In 1670, Flamsteed enrolled at Cambridge and was granted his MA by royal mandate in 1674. Following this, he was ordained as a deacon. During this period, it was not possible to earn a living as an astronomer, so it was essential that Flamsteed took on another profession. At this point, it's probably worth noting just why astronomy was increasingly important during this period. Observation of the stars and other celestial objects had been an important part of human cultures for millennia. At the time of Flamsteed's astronomical career began, the main practical purpose of astronomy was to aid navigation. By the end of the 17th century, Britain was emerging as an increasingly important maritime power, so accurate navigation was an essential part of its political and economic interests. The ability to navigate the open seas was a main way of maintaining relationship with colonies in the Americas and the Caribbean. The growth of the transatlantic slave trade and the developing interest in the Far East were increasingly important for European economies. Navigation and by extension astronomy would play an important role in the expansion of British political and economic power over the next 2 centuries. As time went on, the focus of astronomy would move more away from these practical concerns and lead more towards establishing the origins of the universe. In Flamsteed's day, the practical aspects were at the forefront of the discoveries which would dominate the 17th and 18th century. Concern about how other European countries were developing their knowledge of astronomy led to the founding of the Royal Observatory at Greenwich. Flamsteed was appointed to a royal commission to look into how astronomy could be used to aid navigation. Flamsteed concluded that there wasn't enough accurate information available. In March 1675, he was appointed by royal warrant as Astronomical Observatory for rectifying the tables of the motions of the heavens and the places of the fixed stars, so as to find out the much desired longitude of places for the perfecting of the art of navigation. In June 1765, the Royal Observatory at Greenwich was founded on the direction of the Surveyor General of the Ordnance, Jonas Moore, a mathematician and surveyor who was also a patron of John Flamsteed. The building was designed by Sir Christopher Wren and completed in the summer of 1676. Flamsteed remained Astronomer Royal until his death in 1719. During that time he catalogued around 3,000 stars, which were published in his star catalogue, the Historia Coelestis Britannica, in 1725, 6 years after his death. The Atlas Coelestis followed in 1729. The Historia catalogued 3 times as many stars as the previous star catalogues, and with much greater precision. Despite his Midlands origins, Flamsteed spent much of his working life in London. Derby Museums actually only has 2 objects relating to John Flamsteed. One is a portrait, and the second is a copy of the Atlas Coelestis. This particular copy of the Atlas is the 2nd edition, published in 1753. It contains 27 double-page engravings, engraved and designed by James Thornhill, who also worked on Chatsworth House, St Paul's Cathedral and the Royal Hospital at Greenwich. The Atlas begins, "O render the indefatigable labours of Mr Flamsteed as useful and beneficial to mankind as may be, as well as to complete the work already published. It has been judged very necessary by his executors to carry on and perfect the following sheets, which contain all the constellations visible in our hemisphere, wherein the ancient figures themselves are restored, and the stars laid down in their proper places, with the greatest exactness from his last corrected catalogue. An important figure in John Flamsteed's life was his wife Margaret. She not only assisted him in the observatory, but she was also the driving force behind getting his work published after his death. There had been a previous edition of his catalogue, which was produced without his permission, and which he bought up all the copies and had them destroyed. Margaret Flamsteed worked with his assistants to get his work published after his death. The publication of Flamsteed's works was an expensive endeavour, and it was hampered when much of Margaret's savings were wiped out during the South Sea bubble crisis of 1720, caused by over-speculation and the collapse of the stock of the South Sea Company. Flamsteed's achievements as Astronomer Royal were significant. Although compared to our current knowledge of the universe, astronomy in Flamsteed's day may seem somewhat limited, but John Flamsteed catalogued more than 3 times more stars with greater accuracy than the previous best star catalogues. The size of the universe, as we now know it, would have challenged many of the assumptions of Flamsteed's day, as would the idea of an expanding universe, that the Sun was just one star among many billions, or that our galaxy was just one of billions in the known universe. Another of Flamsteed's achievements was what is now known to be one of the earliest sightings of the planet Uranus. Flamsteed observed this in 1690 and thought it was a star. He catalogued it in his star catalogue as 34 Tauri because of its location in the constellation Taurus. He observed it again in 1712 and 1715. It wasn't until 1781 that the German-born astronomer William Herschel confirmed that this was a previously unknown planet. Flamsteed's life and career, from its beginnings making astronomical observations in Derby, was one of many in the course of the 17th and 18th century that expanded our knowledge of the universe.